Kristen Denny-Chambers, clarinetist, composer, and founder of Clarinet Playground. This is finally video number 40 out of 40, going through all of the etudes in Finger Fitness Études Book 2. This one is for Tom's Skotshne. Tom's Skotshne is dedicated to Tom Puwalski. Clarinetist Tom Puwalski has been playing the clarinet since the age of 9. Tom studied clarinet performance privately with Ignatius Gennusa before attending the Philadelphia College of Performing Arts. He studied with Leon Russianoff at the Manhattan School of Music while he was with the 26th U.S. Army Band stationed in Brooklyn, New York. After he transferred to the U.S. Army Field Band of Washington, D.C., he began an in-depth study of klezmer. Since his retirement from the Army in 1999, he has returned to his studies, this time with Loren Kitt at the University of Maryland. Being very versatile and able to play anything from chamber music, classical to jazz, Dixieland to big band, show tunes to klezmer, Tom was often featured as a soloist with the U.S. Army Field Band during his 19-year tenure. Tom was a co-founder of the popular woodwind quintet Prevailing Winds, and he performs with the Washington, D.C.-based klezmer band The Atonement. Tom is the author of The Clarinetist Guide to Klezmer and Klezmer Basic Training, and has conducted workshops and clinics on clarinet performance and klezmer music. In addition to numerous recordings with the U.S. Army Field Band, he has released 2 recordings with Lox and Vodka. He has arranged and recorded music for 2 documentaries on Jewish American life, and has recorded studio music for commercials, the Discovery Channel, and the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I know I had seen Tom and heard him play before this, but the first time I actually met and interacted with him was when the ICA convention was in Lincoln, Nebraska. That was when I attended his class on klezmer music, learned the tune, and was brave enough to actually hop up and play with him. The tune he taught in that class was the inspiration for this etude. Let's take a look at the music. For this etude, we have a lot of tips. There are some tips on klezmer style at the bottom of each page in this etude, as well as an appendix that goes into more detail on page 77. The best way to learn a new style that's unfamiliar to you is to listen a lot. And please keep in mind, this is just an introduction to klezmer music. You're going to have a lot more work to do if this is brand new to you. Before we dive in, let's talk about what inspired this etude. It was inspired by Merlin's Skotshne, which is the klezmer tune that Tom Puwalski often uses when introducing klezmer style at clarinet conferences. This is how I first met Tom, and I even volunteered to hop up and play with him after he taught the tune to the group. Let's take a listen to the tune that inspired this etude now. At the top of the page, you'll find 2 finger drills. These are so important to practice and make sure you're really comfortable with, because this is what's folded right into the etude. We're finishing up and we are still connecting registers, so using the right hand down is going to be very helpful still as we go from B to A sharp and then B to A. And I like to use the right side B for the finger drill. It helps me make sure I'm really connected. And I also will start on the upper note, the B, because it's very resistant on the clarinet, and we're going to very non-resistant notes in between. So we want to get the air really up and running before we try that drill. For the style and character of this etude, we have what I like to call a slow dance in klezmer style. And what you will find in this etude is very different than what you would find in traditional notation for klezmer music. Really what you would see would be measure 1, the very simplified original tune. But what I'm providing in this etude is every other phrase shows some embellishment ideas and some things that you can try. And of course, you can add your own ideas to the unembellished sections. And on the embellished parts, you can change things up if you want to. So I'll play measure 1 and then I'll play measure 5 with the embellishments. For the rhythm in this etude, we're going to see 32nd notes, 16th and 8th combinations, triplets, eighths, quarters, dotted quarters, half notes, etc. So mostly in the embellished sections, you'll see the more complicated rhythms. You can always count them out really slowly, take them at half speed, whatever you need to do to learn those rhythms. So I'll play measure 5, and then I'll go to measure 29, which has a lot of holding back in the triplets, so there is tons of flexibility. When you see that with great hesitation, you have a lot of time to experiment with your timing. Now let's dig in a little bit deeper and look at some places to focus on. So the main theme features the finger drills. In measure 2, you're going to see the A to B. This is where I would use my right side B, A, B, A. And then in measure 4, we have a C natural on beat 3. So in that case, I would use Pinky, Pinky, B. At first, the embellished sections might seem a little intimidating, so you can definitely learn just the basic structure of them, focus on the rhythm, articulation, and then you can add the trills and all of the other effects. I'll play it simple, and then I'll play it with all the effects. Now let's pause for a minute. I'm going to turn to page 77 and look at some of the ornaments that are featured in the appendix. So this is a completely different tune for these examples, so just keep that kind of filed away in the back of your mind. So if we look at number 1, this is the original tune. This is what you might see on the page. And then number 2 shows doubled and altered rhythms. In klezmer music, if you see a triplet, it will often be played as 2/16 and an 1/8. And you can see that down here in measure 3. And if we look at number 3, we see some trills, which trills we know how to do, that's easy, and then Skotshne. And those are like little cries. So I'll play the trill and the little cry so you can get an idea of what that sounds like. Now as we look at number 4, this is sort of a shortened version of the cry. The shocks or kvetch are like little laughs. And these are tricky. These are kind of tough for me, but you want to do that downward bend really quickly and then be set to do it all over again. Finally, we'll look at number 5. These are called Kristen, and they are like chirpy little grace notes. And the cool thing about the figure that you actually see here is this is the same figure in the etude. So we're going to be seeing these high Ds, and you can actually overblow an open G to get that quick high D out without having to do the traditional fingering for high D. Other tricks include growls and glissandos. So a growl looks way more difficult than it is, or it sounds more difficult than it is, but basically you play and hold a note and then you also hum with it, and that creates a growl effect. I'll start by just playing an upper clarion A, and then I'll add the hum to it, which will create the growl effect. It's a little tricky because it's splitting your air as you hum and play. And then with the glissando, the important thing to remember about that is they are quick in klezmer and they are slow and long in jazz music. So we want to avoid sounding like we're playing jazz when we're doing klezmer. So in between the two intervals that you have the glissando, think really long on the first note and then do the glissando at the last possible minute. I'll play a B to B octave in a jazz style, and then I'll do it in klezmer style. Now I'll show you how some of these effects sound in the etude. One thing we have not covered is grace notes. So you'll see in measure 7, there's a grace note up to the A. And you'll play those just like you would normally play a grace note, but maybe a little more chirpy, a little more abrupt, and that gives it that klezmer flavor. So here's measure 5. Now in measure 13, we've got 2 trills in a row. Measure 14, we've got the fun grace note, and then the high B with vibrato. And then in measure 15, we've got the high D grace note, and again, you can play that open. That's what the O is for, above the high D. So an open G up to the C, and that gives you a nice quick grace note. And then we've got a glissando in B to B octaves. Now we'll look down at measure 21. We start with a quick glissando, and then in 22 we have our first Kristen. Really fun to play, and we're going to have some vibrato on that high B after the Kristen. And then we've got the high D, glissando down to the C sharp. That one's really quick. And then we have the big dramatic drop from the high B down to the low B. Be sure in measure 21 that all of your sharps are carrying through, so that A sharp carries through as well as the high C sharp. The 2 places that have growls in the etude have tons of flexibility built in on purpose. So if we look at measure 25, the growl is on the last note of the measure with extra hesitation, and I stretch that note even more than all the rest of them, and that just makes it fly off really nicely. Also at the beginning of that measure, we have F sharp, so F sharp's in our key, and we have the grace note F sharp, A, F sharp, but we actually don't have to lift this right finger for the A, so that can just stay. F sharp, A, F sharp. It's so quick and it will be unnoticeable, and that just helps the gesture be real chirpy and abrasive. Now we'll look at 28 and really focusing over at 29. We've got these triplets with great hesitation, so try not to get too hung up on the triplet rhythm. It's mostly just very stretched out, very similar to measure 25. Take your time. And then these little glissandos are really schmeary is the best word I can come up with. And then we also have the growl in there. It's really fun to play. Finally, the ending has more fun embellishments, so I'll play that entire section for you. I'll remind you one more time to be sure to read the appendix on page 77. There are some wonderful resources mentioned there, and it'll really help you get started if you want to keep going with klezmer music. Now for some final thoughts. Tom Skotshne is a big stylistic challenge, especially if you have no experience with klezmer music. Be sure to listen to the resources mentioned in the appendix and take your time soaking up the style. The more you listen and study, the easier it'll be to grasp the characteristics. Remember, in klezmer music, the melody is the most important thing, so any added decorations and embellishments are just the cherries on top. Mostly have fun with it. To listen to a beautiful recording of this etude and all other etudes from this book, head over to my website, clarinetplayground.com. Trevor Stewart has recorded all 40 etudes beautifully, and they are available for purchase there on my website. Feel free to join us in the Clarinet Playground group on Facebook, where we play and post for each other. And head over to my website at clarinetplayground.com for more fun music and books. Thank you so much.
doesn't sound real Jewish, does it? And there's a reason for that. It's a major key, but it doesn't sound Jewish. And for it to sound Jewish, there has to be a little bit of sort of pathos, sort of, it's hard to explain, a little bit of, sort of like a little bit of pity in it. So we're going to sit down there, change one note, and see if this doesn't start to sound more Jewish. How many of you think it sounds more Jewish? It does, a little bit. But here's the problem with that. That's us looking at the spider, seeing that spider trying to get up the spout, and seeing the rain wash the spider out. We're all kind of thinking, poor spider. It's an external thing. But if you really want to get to the essence of Jewish music, you have got to sort of get inside that spider. You've got to start wondering what's going on in that spider's mind. You have to sort of get in touch with that spider's inner schlep. Dear Lord, every day except Shabbat, I go up the water fountain, and every day I'm not complaining much. The rain comes and washes me out. What would happen if once, just once, I made it to the top?